Podcast time. Welcome back, guys, to another episode of the Ancient Cricks Podcast. In this episode, we will be going over absolutism, and we'll talk about Louis XIV and compare him to Peter the Great of Russia, because they were both absolute monarchs.
But before we get into this episode, let us introduce a new guest, Savvy.
Hello.
And if you don't remember, I'm Ezra.
I'm Ada.
I'm Emma, and we're the Ancient Cricks Podcast.
Okay, so what was absolutism?
Well, it was a form of monarchy that gave the king or queen complete control over the kingdom. So they didn't have any rules to follow, and it just made them all powerful and that nobody could stop them.
So it's just where they eliminated all other people who might have had power. So then they could just be the only person with power and make all the rules for themselves.
Exactly.
Okay, what was its significance?
Well, it was significant because within absolutism, there was a conflict between the Protestant and the Catholics, which resulted in multiple religious wars and political wars within Spain, France, and England.
So during that time, it was often referred to the time of like absolute monarch. So all the like rulers, basically all of them were like kings, and they had like absolute power, and they could just make all the rules for themselves, and no one else could really do anything about that.
Yeah, and I think it was just really a way that they got power, and it's really influential on how they ruled the country, but also how the downfall came to their countries.
Yeah, because as we'll talk about it, a lot of the kings who were absolute monarchs, they just became like power greedy, and just because they already had all this power, and they wanted to use that power all for themselves to get even more power.
Let's get into first some background information about Catholic Spain.
So yeah, with the Catholic in Spain, King Henry VIII was Catholic until he realized he didn't like his wife anymore.
That's Catholic England, right?
Yeah, Catholic England. He didn't like his
No,
wife.
actually, that was Protestant England. Okay, so we were going to talk about Catholic Spain. Emmett mentioned Catholic Spain, but it actually all started with England, with King Henry VIII of England. But it connects to Catholic Spain because his daughter, one of his daughter, Mary, who is also known as Bloody Mary, married King Philip II in Spain. So let's talk about Henry VIII first. Savvy, could you explain with his wife?
Yeah, so Henry VIII was Catholic, and then he wanted to divorce his wife because he didn't like her anymore and wanted another wife. But you're technically not allowed to do that in a Catholic family with the Pope. So he decided to switch to Protestant because there wasn't no Pope to say that he could not.
But it was still not allowed.
Yeah, but no one could tell him if it was right or wrong because there was no Pope. It was like this quick change that no one knew.
So he actually had 6 different wives in his entire lifetime.
Well, the one that he turned not Catholic. He was Catholic, became Protestant because of Anne Boleyn, the mother of Mary I, right?
Yes.
Okay.
So I could just go over his 6 different wives. So he first married Catherine of Aragon, and he divorced her. Then Anne Boleyn, he executed her after he switched to Protestant. And then he married Jane Seymour, and she died after giving birth. And then he married Anne of Cleves, which he divorced. And then he married Catherine Howard, which he executed. And then he married Catherine Parr, and she survived. And it was all kind of in a pursuit for a male heir, because he really wanted a male to take on his kingdom after he died.
Which one was the mother of Elizabeth I? Do you know?
It was Anne Boleyn.
Isn't that the Oh, so Anne Boleyn is actually the mother of Elizabeth I, not Mary the First.
Yes.
Okay, so that I was wrong.
I think they were half sisters, right? Mary
Yeah, but
and Elizabeth.
yeah, so they had the same dad but different moms, right?
Okay.
Yeah, Catherine of Aragon was Bloody Mary's mother.
Okay.
I think Anne Boleyn was the mother of Bloody Mary.
Wait, what?
I think Anne Boleyn was the mother of Queen
Elizabeth
Elizabeth,
I.
who later became Queen of England. Elizabeth the First.
And Catherine of Aragon was the mother of Bloody Mary. All right, let's get into absolutism in Europe and when Louis the 14th reigned.
He was also known as the Sun King. So he reigned from 1638 to 1715 and was one of the most iconic and powerful monarchs in European history. He reigned over France for 72 years, from 1643 until his death in 1715.
That would make him like the longest reigning monarch of any major European ruler, right?
Yeah, he was. He's remembered for his cultural, political, and military achievements. Also, he really just centralized his royal power and absolutism. So he just centralized it. So then he was the only one with power, really.
And because he was so famous, I think that age is often referred to as the age of Louis the 14th.
Yeah.
He actually had a famous statement. Ezra, do you want to try saying his famous statement?
Sure. It goes le tat se est moi, and it means I am the state. So this really just shows that like the essence of absolutism and just that he holds ultimate authority and he's the ultimate governing body.
So
Well,
how did
Louis,
absolutism?
sorry. I was gonna ask about how he like ascended to the throne at such a young age, right? Savvy,
Uh,
do you remember?
I don't remember fully, but I think after he was born, his dad died when he was
Okay,
at a young age.
yeah, he was really young, and so he had to rule under the regency of his mother, Anne of Austria, and Cardinal Mazarin.
He started his rule when he was like 4 years and something months.
Yeah.
Oh,
But after Mazarin's death in 1661, Louis took complete control of the French government, and he refused to appoint a chief minister.
yeah, he worked like really hard to build a strong and like absolute monarchy. He actually weakened the power of the nobility to like ensure that they had no significant political authority or capacity to challenge the throne at all.
Yeah,
So he
and
just yeah, you go.
you go.
So he just basically he weakened all the other parties that could like help make decisions. So then he was the only one with the power to make the decisions and the only one that like he was the absolute monarch basically.
And while eliminating all those different political parties that could oppose him, he also centralized the government in Versailles, and Versailles was his symbol of power, and it was where he lived, and he moved the government to.
He moved the French court to Versailles, right?
Yeah, the Palace of Versailles, to keep the
Oh.
nobility under his control.
Well, the nobles were actually like kind of a bit forced to like participate in these rituals to keep them distracted and like politically weakened as to like not steal the throne, right?
Yeah, he wanted to keep them down so he could stay up.
Versailles. Is that how you pronounce it? Versailles.
Yeah,
He just built this giant palace, not temple.
like a castle, beautiful castle where he could live and centralize the government.
Yeah, and it was also just to show how powerful he was. Just he could build, do whatever he wanted.
Yeah.
Well, how did he centralize it though? His government.
Well, he created a bureaucracy that answered directly to him and then appointed indentants to oversee the local admission and reduce the influence of the regional parliaments, like the Parliament of Paris.
So this just allowed him to enact policies without interference and like without any council to dispute his policies. So it's basically just him, and he could make all the policies he wanted and make all the decisions without any people that could stop him.
Yeah, so he could consolidate his rule.
Yeah, and the Parliament of Paris like previously wielded like a lot of power, so that was probably a great deal that was able to like reduce their influence.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
huge. He just canceled him.
Like he was able to say like no to everyone, so no one could go against him no matter what he said. So he could do something completely stupid and no one could say no to him.
So basically, he was just making all these policies. What were some of his religious policies they made?
Well, he was a devout Catholic, and he believed that religious diversity would weaken his state. So then in 1685, he revoked the Edict of Nantes, which had previously granted religious freedoms.
Okay.
And so it limited the Protestant Huguenots and then made them forced to be Catholic.
So it like led to like persecution of Protestants, and many of the Huguenots fled the country, right?
Yeah, and it also but since they left the country, it resulted in a loss of skilled laborers and merchants, making the French economy take a hit in the long run and making it weaker.
So he weakened the French economy by doing that, by persecution.
Yeah.
And what were some of his economic policies, like with mercantilism?
Mercantilism.
Yeah,
Mercantilism.
mercantilism.
I think he really just wanted to make the French people a dominant economic power in Europe. So that's why he had all these policies, and he appointed a finance minister, Jean-Baptiste Colbert.
So they actually adopted this policy of mercantilism to like maximize exports, reduce imports, and to increase the flow of wealth into their country.
He also subjected his own people to poverty to fund his rich lifestyle as well.
Yeah, but mercantilism, it also has high taxes or tariff, and he tried to build an export industry and wholesales in the kingdom, which would increase the amount of money coming in.
So he's basically just maximizing exports and limiting imports, just to like gain wealth and power.
Yep-a-woo.
Yeah, but like despite the success of Colbert's policies, Louis XIV kind of had a bit of spending issues, and he was constantly at war, so
Oh yeah.
that was bad.
But first, he expanded the French military power and created one of the largest standing armies in Europe, extending the borders and asserting dominance in Europe.
Yeah,
Yes,
he
but
created. You go. You go.
no. You should. You go.
He created one of the largest standing armies in Europe, actually, to fight in all his wars, basically.
He was great, but like by the end of his reign, France was deeply in debt, which was also a factor that contributed to like their social and economic unrest, which also kind of led to the French Revolution. I feel like he mm, he was great. He had some bad choices, but what do you guys think? Like, did did you like him?
I think overall he did improve France, but then also his choices led to France fall from like being the biggest power in Europe. So his choices really affected his country negatively in the long run.
Yeah, I agree with Emmett. I feel like he got a lot of power, and he got a lot of the things he was sought after, which was just power and expanding the borders, winning wars. He did lose some wars though. But in the long run, I feel like he kind of failed just because it led to the revolution. It led to eventually France's downfall. But I think he was a really strong leader and did a lot of good things for France also.
Yeah, he was really great in the beginning.
And I also feel like if he was able to manage his money well and wasn't as greedy, he would be able to like rule longer or have like France higher than going downwards.
Yeah, if he made different decisions, France could still be a giant superpower today.
Because I feel like he just made a lot of bad decisions, like kind of greedy, more power hungry decisions, just in starting wars and just spending a lot of the wealth that he had made. And I feel like that really was affected France negatively. So he won a lot of things, but he also lost a lot of things for France. Any other thoughts on him?
Nah, that was good. Thank you.
He also like when Louis died with religious liberties to the Protestant of France.
Oh yeah, because since he died, his policies against the Protestants were probably lifted, which gave them freedom that they could come back in and continue being Protestants in France.
He was also buried in France after he died there.
Mm.
How did he die?
He died from a rare disease that caused him to be disabled.
That's unfortunate.
Let's just have a moment of silence for Louis XIV
Womp womp.
and just honor him.
Okay.
Gangrene.
Yep.
All right, let's move on to Peter the Great of Russia.
Peter the Great. Was he great?
Probably, yeah.
I mean, most likely he's called Peter the Great.
I think he's remembered as Russia's most transformative rulers, and he was the Tsar of Russia from 1682 until his death in 1725.
Yeah. He like dramatically changed the course of Russia and modernized the country, introducing like lots of Western ideas and European ideas and practices. He also expanded Russia's territory. I don't know if they needed that because they're already huge, but his reign, like, it really brought Russia to the modern world because before they were just kind of living in their like, old ways, which were way behind the rest of Europe. And he really just transformed it and brought it back up.
Like from a medieval state into a significant European power.
Yeah, yeah. And that really just changed I don't like history probably wouldn't be the same today if he hadn't stepped in there and modernized it back then.
So how did he rise to power?
Came to power in 1682. Actually, he started by sharing the throne with his half-brother, Ivan V. Yes, Ivan V, and under the regency of their sister, Sophia.
But in like 1689, Peter took full control of Russia and the throne of Russia, and that was the beginning of his ambitious program for modernization and reform.
Peter the Great was just like determined to modernize Russia. He saw that like Russia was lagging behind from other countries in Europe and like in technology, culture, and really they're just military. It was all just spread out and not organized into one power. And he just wanted to change that and he wanted to make them powerful.
I really like Peter. I feel like He seems like a great ruler. He's actually perhaps best known for his efforts to westernize and modernize Russia. After he traveled to Europe during his Grand Embassy, which was like during 1697, 1698, he was inspired by the technological, cultural, and military advancements of Western Europe. So, after he saw all of that, he was so determined to bring these innovations to Russia. So, after that, he like embarked on a series of reformations.
It
What?
was neat. It was neat that like he was looking of how it was he was like Russian kind of. He wasn't like putting himself higher than everyone. He said my country needs to get like upstack with the rest of Europe and not just getting himself known like Louis.
Yeah, he was more interested in his country's success than his own.
Yeah. I mean, he did have some weird policies, like he had this one where like all the Russian guys had to shave their beards. They had these traditional like big beards, and he went around and he would like shave their beards.
Oh. Okay.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Well, within the military, one of Peter's first priorities was to modernize the Russian military. And so he recognized the army and introduced new tactics, uniforms, and weapons based on the European models. He also built Russia's first navy, which allowed him to challenge the rival powers in the Baltic Sea, like the Swedes and the people of Denmark and Poland.
Yeah, not only that, he sought to like centralize and strengthen the Russian state. He introduced a system of government departments, actually known as colleges, to manage different areas of state policy, including finance, war, and foreign affairs. He also actually established a senate to oversee the administration of the empire, but it still remained largely under his control.
So he just saw that like at the time, Russia was just a bunch of like more spread out small cities. They weren't like really a unified country, really. And he just wanted to unify them into a central power, Russian state. He also had some social reforms. Um, he wanted to modernize the Russian society, and he did this by like adopting Western styles in like clothing and grooming. Like as I was talking about, like with the
Yeah.
beards, he imposed a beard tax. That's what they called it. And he would go around and shave their beards. So I got some people to not like him, but he's just trying to like modernize Russia. He also reformed the education, and he established like schools in Russia to study science and technology. And he saw that as essential for Russia to progress.
So actually, one of Peter's most enduring legacies was the establishment of St. Petersburg. It was a new capital city on the Baltic Sea. When was it founded again?
It
Does
was
anyone
founded in
remember?
1703 during the Great Northern War against Sweden. It was
So,
intended as
yeah.
Russia's window to the West, so like
Oh.
the gateway to their Western countries.
Because Russia's just like so spread out. It's just all over into Asia. Part of it's into Europe. So they just needed a place so they could just go into Europe. An easy window into it.
And in the Great Northern War, Peter successfully defeated Sweden, giving him access to the Baltic Sea and safety within the sea because he was now the biggest power there.
And this victory actually marked a significant territorial expansion for Russia. It like solidified Russia's presence in the Baltic region and positioned major player in European politics.
He also had really significant religious control. He reformed the Russian Orthodox Church, and he brought it under state control and abolished the position of patriarch. which was the highest office in the church, and replaced it with like a government-controlled body called the Holy Synod. I don't know if that's how you say it. Synod. So he's basically just making churches under control of the government also. And this made him have authority and diminished the church's influence on the people. Made it so he could have all the power on what the people heard.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's just talk about his like legacy in general, like as a whole. His legacy was pretty vast and complex, right? He transformed Russia from a relatively isolated medieval state into a powerful and modern empire with a strong military, a growing economy, and increased cultural ties to Western Europe.
And his policies laid the groundwork for Russia's expansion and modernization, which would continue under later rulers like Catherine the Great.
A lot of his methods, though, they were like brutal, like they were implemented with brutal force. He was known for his authoritarian methods, using fear to like enforce his policies over Russia. So his reign was marked by like significant oppositions. Lots of people disagreed with him trying to just modernize Russia.
Yeah,
Um,
despite all the harsh rules, Peter's impact on Russia was really great, and his efforts at modernizing and westernizing the country reshaped Russian society, government, and culture for generations to come.
Yeah, okay. So let's compare, like quickly compare Louis the 14th and then Peter the Great, and then that should be it. Okay. So Louis the 14th and Peter the Great, both rulers centralized power in their hands, significantly reducing the influence of the nobility and traditional institutions. Louis the 14th achieved this through the lavish culture of Versailles, where nobles were required to attend, while Peter did so through reform, reorganization, and military might.
Yeah, so they were both great powers, and like they were classic examples of absolute monarchs. But while Peter the Great, his legacy continued on, and his strengthening of Russia made it stronger. But Louis the 14th weakened France with his policies.
yeah, I feel like with Peter, a lot of people didn't like him at the time just because he was harsh with his policies. But I feel like it really helped Russia in the future. It really made it move on from its medieval ways and advance it. And I don't think it would be the same without him today.
And Peter was more for like his country, whereas in like Louis was more for like himself and making himself known.
Who did you like more, Louis the 14th or Peter the Great?
Okay, I liked Peter the Great.
Peter the Great.
Peter the Great.
I kind of liked Louis the 14th's like extravagance though, just him like building the giant temple just for no reason, basically, just to show
His
his power.
palace.
His palace, yeah, not temple. I think that's it for this episode.
Comment down below who you
We
like.
can wrap it up.
Yeah,
And don't
okay,
forget
let's wrap it
to
up.
like and subscribe. That's a wrap.
Okay,
we're
bye
we're
guys.
also trying to beat Cricks in subscribers, so please subscribe and yeah, like this video so it'll pop out on more people's feeds.
Okay,
Bye.
bye
Bye.
bye.
Thank you.
Bye.